Liberal Fox News commentator Marie Harf likely made her counterpart Jessica Tarlov very proud today when she shut down the bad faith talking points of her MAGA co-hosts about President Biden's mental fitness and Hunter Biden's criminal convictions by reminding them of Donald Trump's criminal convictions and his own questionable mental fitness. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to play from the most recent episode of The Five, a show we have not covered nearly as often without the wonderful, consistent performance of Jessica Tarlov. As you know, we are the unofficial fan club of Jessica Tarlov, and she's on maternity leave. She will be returning shortly before the Republican convention in mid-July. But in the meantime, when they have Marie Harf on, she does a pretty good job, folks. I mean, she makes Jessica Tarlov truly proud. And I found some highlights here that I really want to emphasize. In the first one is that she pushes back on the talking points about Hunter Biden's criminal convictions and whether or not President Biden will commute or pardon him, and reminds them that Donald Trump's legal woes are infinitely more important to this election.
So, Marie, are you under the impression that there will be no pardon, no commutation given at all?
I would predict here that there's 0% chance that Joe Biden commutes or pardons his son.
Why?
I just do not think that he will do it because he's not that kind of man. And Judge Jeanine, I respectfully disagree with what you said about the family sitting in the front row of that courtroom together. This is an incredibly close family. They have been together through so much tragedy in their lives. They have been through enormous challenges. Addiction is a huge problem for many Americans. And I think there is a lot of sympathy and empathy for what Hunter went through, for what his family has gone through. And I do think at the end of the day that when voters go into that voting booth and it's Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, not Donald Trump versus Hunter Biden, that Donald Trump's myriad of legal challenges, which go well beyond the case he was already convicted in, and his ability to try, and he has said he wants to have revenge against his political enemies. He says this over and over again, guys.
You raise a good point,
hear
though.
this.
Phenomenal work by Marie Harf there by pointing out all sorts of things. Number one, you know, Jeanine Pirro and all the others tried to insinuate that First Lady Jill Biden showing up to Hunter Biden's trial and multiple family members doing so towards the end was an attempt at jury nullification or jury intimidation. It's absolutely ridiculous. Even in the aftermath of the criminal conviction, there were no statements or even insinuations by President Biden or the First Lady or any of their surrogates or any prominent Democrat that there was a miscarriage of justice and that the judge, a Trump appointee, was in the pocket of the Republicans and trying to hurt President Biden politically. Nobody attacked the jury or the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who prosecuted Hunter Biden, David Weiss. None of that happened. It was an objectively stark contrast to what we see from MAGA Republicans time and time again. The fact of the matter is, President Biden and the Democrats have been much, much better at managing this and have the moral high ground by far compared to Republicans. It's also worthwhile pointing out that Donald Trump and his legal woes are much more important because he's the candidate. As she points out, he's not going up against Hunter Biden. He's going up against Joe Biden. Now, of course, bad faith Republicans are going to do everything in their power to somehow make President Biden morally culpable and therefore politically culpable for the actions and legal transgressions of his adult son, even though they would never accept that logic if the shoe was on the other foot. But that's because MAGA Republicans only ever operate in bad faith. So good on Marie Harf for basically preempting that argument and reminding them that if Donald Trump wins, he will seek revenge. He has publicly reiterated that he wants to use the justice system to go after his political enemies, which is something that he's promised in every other election cycle. And Republicans cheered him on. These same MAGA co-hosts celebrated Donald Trump's rhetoric, and they were only upset that he was not more successful in weaponizing his Justice Department. Trump says he's learned from that and that he'll appoint people, unlike last time, who will do his bidding, regardless of what the Constitution says, regardless of checks and balances, and regardless of Justice Department norms. Really terrifying stuff. In this other clip, they address President Biden's mental fitness. Again, that's a recurring issue on The Five. They want to make it more of an issue. They want to exacerbate questions that the American people have about the president, while omitting the fact that Donald Trump likewise is questioned and scrutinized for his various gaffes, his various malapropers, all the crazy things he says. He's graded on a curve. And Marie Harf draws attention to that and points out that there's a clear double standard here. And Donald Trump says all kinds of disqualifying things that if we're really being honest, we would also pay attention to.
Logically.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Common sense. Marie, I will answer your question totally honestly.
Okay.
For the first time. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Look, I watched that video and I'm also concerned, right? I wish Joe Biden were 20 years younger. What Democrats will honestly tell you is when you put someone who looks older and policies that I'll get to in a second that a lot of people actually do support, especially when we're talking about seniors, up against a candidate in Donald Trump who goes on stage and says crazy, insane things, does a whole talk about sharks in Las Vegas. Like, play that tape.
He's joking, by the way.
But but I'm just saying, I'm being totally
You're going after jokes. This guy is mentally deranged.
Yes, Donald Trump is.
No.
And when you look at him on stage and he's saying these insane things that if you're not really down in the weeds on the far right truth social narrative, when you're an independent voter, you're like, this guy seems
Your example
crazy.
is the shark and electric stuff. That was hilarious.
The last example, but there's so many things. And the last thing I will say is when it comes to seniors, the Biden campaign is going to talk about the fact that in every yearly Trump budget that he proposed, he cut Social Security and Medicare. And Joe Biden has passed insulin caps. He's lowered prescription. He's lowered prescription drug costs. So, like, there are actual policies that the Biden
actually, one of the problems is that neither of them.
So again, great on Marie Harf for pointing this out. Now, Fox propagandists will try to claim that it was President Trump, when Trump was in office, who lowered insulin prices. It's not true. He proposed an executive order which would have allowed certain parts of Medicare to voluntarily lower their insulin prices to $35. Voluntarily, some parts of Medicare and Medicaid, and it was never implemented. President Biden, as part of his Inflation Reduction Act, expanded it to all seniors, and it was mandatory. Okay, so it was objectively greater by far than anything that Donald Trump ever attempted with respect to insulin. And again, it was never implemented. But again, MAGA Republicans just openly lie about it, and it was subject to multiple fact checks on Twitter, putting them in their place. This is how bad and dishonest and bad faith MAGA Republicans are on the Fox Propaganda Network. They are trying to steal, to poach President Biden's legislative and executive accomplishments to their benefit, knowing that the MAGA cult and their viewers will take that meme, that debunked lie, and run with it. Because again, as much as we like to say that, people should vote on facts, people vote on feelings. And if a large swath of the voter base assumes incorrectly that it was Donald Trump who lowered insulin prices and not Joe Biden, even though that's not true, they will vote accordingly, which is why it is necessary for President Biden and his surrogates to relentlessly defend their accomplishments. Facts do not speak for themselves, and that's why lies find such fertile ground on the Fox Propaganda Network. And we have to make sure that that doesn't bear some sort of sinister fruit as the election approaches. Okay, we have to make sure that the facts are resolutely and persuasively defended. It was President Biden who lowered insulin prices, not Donald Trump. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar. Great performance by Marie Harf. Great for her pointing out, too, again, as we've discussed, that there are serious questions by the same standard they apply to President Biden. There are serious questions about Donald Trump's cognitive fitness. And again, Democrats need to relentlessly make that case because those same polls are not looking good for Trump. He has an advantage in the polling with respect to mental fitness, but it's not much, folks. Majorities of Americans in poll after poll after poll say that they also question Donald Trump's mental fitness. We should never cede that ground. What we should say time and time again is this. They're both old, they're both gaffe machines, and the polls say that a majority of Americans are concerned about their mental fitness. So given that, we have to examine them substantively. We have to look at them substantively. And what we learn is that 40 out of 44 of Donald Trump's top closest advisors, senior staff, and cabinet officials, 40 out of 44 will not endorse him. Many of them have explicitly said they will not support him. And many of them have publicly said that he's an effing moron. And that's a direct quote from his former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. Multiple top Trump advisors have said he's deranged, that he's narcissistic, that he's an idiot, that he's ignorant, that he's uncurious. You say whatever you want about President Biden, but his cabinet officials have endorsed him. And we also see, as we've talked about time and time again, the results in the agenda. You may despise President Biden's agenda. You may think it's un-American. You may think it's communist or socialist. But it's simply an objective fact that Biden has been vastly superior at accomplishing his agenda, getting his agenda accomplished, than Donald Trump. And that is a reflection of competence, period. So the substantive analysis is only in Biden's advantage and in his favor and to Trump's detriment. So we have to talk about this stuff. But anyway, great job by Marie Harf. I can't wait for Jessica Tarlov to come back. I'd love to see them both on the 5 every now and then and maybe, make it 2 reasonable people versus 3 MAGA supporters. They could still have an extra person if they feel comfortable in that way, if they need to outnumber their opposition. But great stuff all the way around. And let me know what you think in the comments.